Now, I've been preaching for almost 30 years, and twice before I've offered an open letter as a sermon. Today will mark number 3. I offered my first letter sermon when I served down 580 in Livermore. At the time, I had been writing to an inmate at Folsom Prison named Jesse. Jesse had sent a letter to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Livermore because he heard that a junior high teacher of his was a member of the church, and he wanted to reconnect if he could. Now, I never quite understood why he thought the teacher was a member of the church, but I had some free time on a Friday afternoon, and so I spent an hour writing him back. And before long, every second or third Friday afternoon, I'd spend an hour or so and write Jesse another letter. He wrote more often to me than I did, but he had a little more free time. I began to realize that it might be time to move on from that congregation when I noticed that the time I devoted to writing Jesse felt like the most real time of the week. And at that time, I shared one of my letters to him with the congregation because I'd been spending a lot of church time on Jesse, and I figured I'd let them know about it. I preached my second open letter sermon a few years ago now to a former congregant who had died after a long illness a year or so before. Jane knew more about congregational dynamics than anyone I knew, with the exception of Bev Smurha, who worked for the former Pacific Central District of our denomination, and Patty Lawrence, who used to teach congregational organization in seminary. So at the request of Jane's daughter, I wrote something up to be shared for her memorial service, but I wasn't satisfied with what I sent in, and Jane was someone who expected excellence. So when I had a little time, I rewrote it, and it grew into something of a sermon, an exercise in gratitude, if you will. Now I want to share with you a letter to my barber, Danny Gomez. I'll print it out and hand it to him when I go in for my next haircut. Now, none of this is necessarily anything that I think you should be interested in, except I think you'd find the question he asked me a couple of haircuts ago really a great question. Now, before I delve into Danny's question, let me tell you a bit about him and the conversational back and forth that's developed between us. Danny is 25 years old. He's lived in the greater Bay Area all of his life. He's asked me several targeted questions about this faith that I serve. He had never heard of Unitarian Universalism. Surprise, surprise. And while he said that what I've told him about our faith sounds all right, he's made it clear that he feels the need for a little more certainty in his faith. As he put it once, and I'm paraphrasing here, I can steer into trouble without a clear path to follow. That's understandable in my book. And to Danny, while I've explained to you that I'm not Christian, there are 2 things from the Bible I found that are sure guides, and I want you to know that I respect the tradition that you're part of. The first, and I could have gone on about this, but I'll just do 2. The first, judgment is mine, saith the Lord. We are wise to be slow to judgment. What is ours to do is to practice the challenging art of discernment, choosing how we want to be in relationship with one another. And the second is something attributed to Jesus. The Sabbath is made for us, not us for the Sabbath. As I see it, that means that religion should serve human need, not to be used to wear us down. And Danny, I could just say 2 things and be done with your question, that the advice I would give anyone is that the goal of our lives is to create great memories and to do as much good as we can. But That would be a little reductionistic and overly general, so let's delve in a bit deeper. 2 haircuts ago, Danny asked me the question he said he had asked others sitting in his barber chair, at least to those of us of a certain age. What advice, he asked, would you give yourself at my age? Again, Danny is 25. I told them that when I was 25, I was going on 45. So I would tell myself that it would be okay just to be 25. In short, to take off the feeling that I had to shoulder the weight of the world and have a bit more fun. Danny's response, so if you were talking to me now, you'd just say have more fun? Come on, you have to have more to it. There has to be more to it than that. Challenge accepted. When it came time for my last haircut, I had prepared a couple more things to say. But first I gave him some backstory. Not exactly when I was 25, but 10 years older, when I was 35. Well, it was actually 5 days before my 35th birthday that my first wife told me that she had fallen in love with someone else. And while I didn't regret any of the 7 years I spent with Jennifer, it wasn't a grudge exactly, but I wanted every minute of those 7 years back. Those were good years. Impossible, but that's what I wanted. So I was 35 when I started realizing that I was 35 and I started longing for my 20s all over again. The 20s I never really gave myself. By 35, I had buried my father and was losing a partner I had hoped that would be with me for the rest of my life. Cue the violins, I know, but I did want to give a bit of context for that answer that I led with, Danny. And I offered very quickly 2 comments the last time I was in Danny's barber chair. And looking back, they both came from my parents. I'll get to those in a minute, but there's one thing I want to say first. And maybe I've alluded to this before, but I want to give it a little more specificity. The world is vast and it is small. And both its vastness and its smallness can be astounding. We are wise to let ourselves be astounded. I was reminded of this recently when I went online to learn about a singer I've just begun listening to, the bluegrass virtuoso Molly Tuttle. Do any of you know her? When I wanted to learn more about Molly, she was born in Santa Clara, raised in Palo Alto, and now Nashville is home for her. And she was the first woman to win an international finger-picking competition. She's really, really good. But when I went to see if she had a Wikipedia entry online, another bluegrass woman from the Bay Area, Kathy Kalick, is listed as one of Molly Tuttle's 4 musical role models. Kathy Kalick is a bluegrass musician who I think used to or still lives in Oakland. She's also the older sister to Sarah, a girl from my high school youth group who I used to date for a while. Now, this sort of thing kind of pickles my mind. That's a phrase you may hear me say every now and then. My brain gets pickled. And it leaves me befuddled, but with an odd smile on my face. It's a lovely small world. Sort of like, and I've mentioned this before, discovering that my Sunday school teacher when I was 12, Shirley McDonald, had marched in Selma with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You may have heard the old celebrity game, 6 Degrees from Kevin Bacon. We're all more connected like that. It's not just Kevin Bacon. So when you come across these connections you never dreamed of, let yourself be dazzled by them. It's worth being befuddled and getting your mind pickled a little bit. Anyhow, back to the lessons my parents passed on. The first is from my mother, and it may seem simple, but I think it's profound. Leave the campground cleaner than you found it. Meaning we are responsible to, if not for, one another. Play as fair as you can, go the extra mile when you can. As my mother got older, she picked up more and more trash from wherever she was walking. When I was younger, it really embarrassed me. I hope you can imagine teenage embarrassment. And now I find myself following suit. In her last years, she would, before she went anywhere, she'd grab a trash bag. I haven't gotten to that point, but it's not far off, I don't think. We jokingly began calling her a bag lady, and thankfully she took that ribbing in stride. The second thing I want to lift up now comes from my father. Well, it's not from him directly, but he's something he passed on to me. Dad was a PhD chemical engineer who found himself as a manager in a moderately large pharmaceutical company. You may have heard of the sweetener Equal. In pure nepotism, I got a summer job testing catalytic hydrogenations for NutraSweet, which is Equal. My work saved the company $1 million over the next couple years, and I got a pizza as thanks for lunch. That was almost a fair trade. Managing people was not in Dad's wheelhouse, but it was something he was called to do. And over some time, there were some challenging moments that I don't know much about, but what I do know is that over a couple years, he went to a few week-long executive management trainings, those things in the wood that companies spend a lot of money on. After one of those, he came home with 2 Psychology Today audio tapes from one of the workshop leaders, a psychologist named Donald C. Klein. Dad gave me one of Klein's tapes, and he gave another to my brother. I've never listened to the one he gave my brother. The one he gave me is something I've listened to at least 20 times. And it's on the power of appreciation. And during it, and I'll preach more about appreciation, you can bet on it. During the tape that he made that my father gave me, Klein references a Harvard philosopher named James Carse, C-A-R-S-E, who wrote a book back in '86 titled Finite and Infinite Games, which is subtitled A Vision of Life as Play and Possibility. Carr talks about finite games as those we know, basketball, for example. Schoolyard or office hierarchies might be others. Finite games have clearly agreed to beginnings and endings and rules that all parties agree to. Carr begins his book with these words. He writes, "There are at least 2 kinds of games. One could be called finite, the other infinite. A finite game is played for the purpose of winning. An infinite game for the purpose of continuing the play. An infinite game is to be won by, if an infinite game is to be won by someone, it must come to a definitive end. It will come to an end when someone has won. We know that someone has won the game when all of the players agreed who among them is the winner. No other condition than the agreement of the players is absolutely required in determining who has won the game." Carse continues, and I'm just going to be reading a little bit. "In one respect, but only one, an infinite game is identical to a finite game. Of infinite players, we can also say that if they play freely. If they must play, they cannot play. Otherwise, infinite and finite play stand in the sharpest possible contrast. He writes at one point, and I just love this line, it doesn't fit under the definitions, but I love this: to be prepared against surprise is to be trained. To be prepared for surprise is to be educated. Karst ends his book with these words, and yes, this is a spoiler alert. Infinite players are not serious actors in any story, but the joyful poets of a story that continues to originate what they cannot finish. And the last line in his book, there is but one infinite game, by which he means life. Now, this may feel abstract, but I've spent a lot of time with this, so it's less abstract over time. I find it compelling. I want to play fairly, but I want to keep playing as long as I can. I imagine some of you do too. And the fact that this came to me from my chemical engineer father continues to astound me. I didn't know he had it in him. And maybe it didn't at first, but it came to him, and he passed it on. I've said before here that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Well, this is what I mean. I stand on the shoulders of both my parents, and yes, they were as fallible as anyone. There are other stories I could tell you, but I remain standing in appreciation, gratitude, and love for them both. Looking back, Danny, at these lessons from those I've loved the longest, something becomes clear. Well, two things, really. First, I've been fortunate to be born into a family that gave me the support they could. And second, and this is wider, looking back on this helps one thing become really clear. The most important decisions we make in life may be who we invite to share our lives with, who we surround ourselves with. That will you marry me question I mentioned earlier, chief but not only among them. The colleagues we choose to associate, the family we choose for ourselves, loved ones, all. Who we choose to share our lives with shapes the lives we'll lead. And as far as I see it, it's as simple as that. In closing, I want to circle back to something I've learned in spite of it all. And this goes back to Kathy and Sarah Kalick's father, Bruce. When it was clear that Sarah and I had parted ways, Bruce invited me to take a walk with him down to a local ice cream shop. He'd treat me to a cone. Maybe it was even a double, I don't know. It was a beautiful and friendly invitation, one I chose not to take him up on, saying, I'm too old for ice cream. I was 17. Is anyone ever too old for ice cream? Oh, you are smarter than I was then. Yes, thank you. No. I remember having ice cream with my 83-year-old grandmother, her last birthday. She had a double helping. So, Danny, I hope you will be able to find something of value in all of this. Thank you for the gift of your question. You are much more than the guy who cuts my hair, though I'm honored to have found you for that. But I'm much more glad I found someone willing to ask such great questions. Years ago, I had a friend of Lakota, Native American blood. From him, I learned this saying from those people. I offer it to you now, Danny, with a full heart. Long may you run, my friend. Long may you run. So may it be. Amen.